Welcome back to What's the Plot? This is a recap of Antz, a 1998 American animated adventure comedy. Spoilers ahead. It starts off with an ant called Z having a therapy session with his psychiatrist, talking about his life problems. We then get a short tour of the inside of the huge anthill the movie is based in. Every ant that is born gets placed on a table, and is allocated to be either a soldier, or a worker ant. The main character Z, is a worker ant, and as he starts to work, another ant called Azteca accidentally flicks dirt into his face. She can see him struggling and comes over to reassure him about what they are working for. The supervisor comes over and tells them their next job, which is called the wrecking ball. This is a huge ball made up of a bunch of ants climbing on top of each other, made to demolish large objects. Z tells one of the ants that heights make him nauseous, and he loses grip of the ball and drops it, causing it to roll over a few other ants. The General Mandible sees this and gets frustrated, calling the worker ants weak, and the supervisor tries to reassure him that everyone is working hard. Mandible still isn't happy, and says that from now on any worker that falls behind is going to have to personally explain themselves to Colonel Cutter. Mandible then tells Cutter that a termite army has mobilized against them, and that they will have to send troops to attack their colony. Cutter says that's suicide, but Mandible agrees almost like he knows what he is doing. Mandible then goes to get approval from the Queen to declare war, and explains that the termites want their land and that it must be done. After she gives him the approval, Princess Bala comes over to speak with Mandible about having a conversation before they get married. This only lasts for a couple of seconds, then the princess goes over to her mother and asks her why she is marrying this guy because they have nothing in common. The Queen explains that he cares about her, he is just not good at showing it. Bala then looks down at the worker ants, and feels like she is missing out on some fun. We then see Z sitting in a bar depressed about being a worker ant, drinking with his soldier ant friend Weaver. A drunk ant called Grebes then starts telling Z about a better place, near a monolith, called Insectopia. He said you can be your own ant there, no wars and no colony, but Z and Weaver think he is just a drunk lunatic. Princess Bala then turns up in disguise with her friends. She sees Z sitting at the bar on his own, so she walks over to him and asks him if he wants to dance. He turns round and says absolutely, and they go off to dance. Z starts moonwalking and bumps into a soldier ant, falls down to the ground and gets told to watch his step. Bala stands up to the soldier, but Z breaks it up and takes her away. As they're walking away he gets told to get back in place, but this time he tries to stand up for himself, which leads to one of the soldier ants throwing a punch at him. Weaver steps in the way and pushes the ant across the room, and a big fight breaks out. Bala's friends then call out Princess Bala. Z is shocked to hear that she is the princess, and asks when he can see her again. She says never, and gives him a kiss on the cheek. We then see Z working the next day, but this time he is happy and singing, and Azteca looks confused at this. Z is in love and can't stop thinking about his night with the princess, and he goes to the bar at night in hopes that she turns up again. He soon realizes that she is not coming, as the night ends and he is the last one in there. The worker behind the bar says that it's always quiet the night before the royal reviews, as the soldiers need their sleep before meeting the queen. Z then realizes that his only chance to see the princess is if he is a soldier ant, and he wakes up his friend Weaver, asking to switch places for one day. Weaver agrees when he realizes that he might get some action with some of the worker girls. Z marches in line with all of the worker ants, and as he spots the princess he calls out for her, but she doesn't hear or see him. One of the soldier ants introduces himself to Z as Barbados, and helps him stay in position. General Mandible stands above them and explains the termite situation, and that he is sending them out into battle. Z gets worried as he realizes what he has gotten himself into, and as they are marching towards the battle, he asks Barbados if the termites are pushovers, but Barbados replies saying that they are 5 times their size, and shoot acid from their foreheads. The soldiers charge towards the termite colony and the war begins. During the battle, a termite is about to attack Z, but Barbados pushes him out of the way and kills the termite, and proceeds to fight with others. Another termite spots Z, and tries to spray him with acid, but he runs away and falls into a small hole in the ground. We then see Weaver working in the anthill, and Azteca notices him and has a crush on him, and he seems to feel the same way about her. Whilst he is showing off flexing his muscles, the supervisor comes over and tells him to get back to work. Azteca tells him to cut him a break, which leads him to taking away her rations for the day. Weaver uses this opportunity to ask her out for dinner. We then go back to the war zone, but the fight is over and we see the aftermath. Z comes out from where he was hiding, and looks around seeing dead ants and termites everywhere. He hears Barbados calling him over, so he runs over to see if he is okay, only to notice that there is nothing left of him apart from his head. Barbados slowly passes away, but before this, he tells Z not to make his mistake in life by following orders, but to think for himself. We then see General Mandible and Colonel Cutter back at the anthill making plans, when interrupted by a soldier giving the news that the enemy was destroyed, but it was a disaster for their troops as well. However, one soldier made it out alive. Mandible is not happy with this news, but pretends that he is. Z and Mandible step out to a crowd of ants cheering, but Z is trying to explain to him that he didn't even do anything. Weaver and Azteca are in the crowd sad about the news, because they think Z is dead, but they then realize that Z is in fact the warrior hero, so they celebrate. Mandible then takes Z to see the queen. The princess is there, and she recognizes Z from the bar. She says this out loud, and her mother is not happy to hear that her daughter was in a bar. She accidentally says that Z used to be a worker then, and Mandible is not happy that a worker ant danced with his fiancé. He orders his troops to arrest Z, but Z grabs the princess, and holds her hostage, while stepping away from the troops, and they both end up falling down a long waste tunnel, which leads to the outside of the anthill, into some garbage. 6 ant troops come running out to save the princess, but a human hand pops up above them, holding a magnifying glass, extracting heat from the sun which instantly burns them to death. Z and Princess Bala both run in the opposite direction, and manage to escape it by hiding underneath a leaf. Bala gets very stressed out that she is now stuck outside of the colony with Z. Z ignores her, and climbs up a thistle plant, spots a monolith, and realizes that Greaves from the bar was telling the truth about Insectopia. He climbs down and tells the princess to go back home herself, as he is on his way to find Insectopia. They both go in opposite directions, and Bala accidentally ends up on top of a terrifying green leaf bug, so she decides to run back towards Z. We then see the queen asking General Mandible to save her daughter, and then a few worker ants doing Chinese whispers about what happened with Z taking the princess hostage. The news ends up coming back to Weaver. He laughs and explains that Z is his friend and just a worker ant. The others can't believe it, as they have been led to believe their whole lives that all they must do is work. They all come to the realization that they do not need to work, and the news spreads around pretty quickly. We then see Bala and Z back in the wilderness, and they find a big lake, which is probably just a puddle, and they run over to get a drink. A drop of water falls off the monolith, and lands straight on top of them both, which sends them flying. Z gets trapped inside the remainder of it. Bala tries to break the water, but ends up being trapped inside of it with him. They go rolling off a leaf, landing on the floor below them, and it breaks open. Z then convinces the princess that there is a better place, and promises that if they don't find it, he will take her back to the colony. They then hop onto a leaf-made boat and sail across the water. Back at the anthill, all of the workers are protesting, screaming "We want Z." General Mandible interrupts, and gives a speech trying to turn them all against Z, saying that he doesn't care about them, and that's why he left and kidnapped the princess. He offers them more food and less work, and even gives them all a day off. This puts them on his side. They all start celebrating, and chanting his name. Mandible then asks Cutter to bring him Weaver, as he noticed that he was holding a worker's hand in the crowd. Bala wakes up and calls Z over, because she spots a picnic, and they think it is Insectopia. Z tries to eat some of the food, but it is wrapped in cling film, and he cannot bite through it. 2 wasps then turn up, and fly down to talk to them, and a big spatula slams down from the air, crushing and killing the lady wasp. A human's foot then stomps down on top of Z and Bala gets stuck in a piece of gum which is on the bottom of the shoe. The foot comes down again trying to squash Z, but he manages to escape it one more time. He then grabs onto the lace of the other shoe, in attempt to get closer to Bala to save her. Flying through the air on top of the shoe, he leaps across to the other shoe lace, and it wraps around under the shoe, and he ends up stuck in the piece of gum with her. The human then picks off the gum from the shoe with a coin, and flicks it over to some bins. We then see Weaver being beaten by General Mandible's troops, while interrogating him, trying to make him tell them where Z is, but he remains silent. They bring in Azteca, and begin to hurt her, so Weaver has no option but to tell them that Z went to find Insectopia. Mandible then tells Colonel Cutter to go and collect the princess, and kill Z. Back to Bala and Z, they realize that they have now found the real Insectopia, and they enjoy themselves touring around it. Colonel Cutter heads out on the hunt for the princess. Bala and Z are about to kiss, but get interrupted by some other bugs, asking Z to collect some wood for a fire. Z heads off to grab some, and while he's gone, Colonel Cutter turns up. Bala tries to sneak away, but the other insects point her out. Cutter asks where Z is, and she quickly lies and says he is dead, to save him from getting hurt. Cutter picks her up, and flies off with her. Z spots them in the sky, and begins to panic. He decides that he has to go back for her, and the wasp from the picnic pops out of a bottle, and offers to take him, picks him up, and they fly off. Back at the colony, the troops bring in the princess, and she demands to know what Mandible is planning. He walks out with his troops and shuts her in a room. Z arrives back at the anthill, and the guards tell him that he must go to the tunnel opening ceremony. Z hears the princess calling for help, so he climbs through a window, and shimmies across into her room. Bala shows Z General Mandible's plans, and Z realizes that he is planning to wash out the entire anthill to kill off all of the ants, and even the queen. General Mandible gives a last speech, before leaving the queen and the rest of the ants in the anthill. He then gives Cutter orders to seal up all of the exits, and his troops block all of the doors with big boulders. Z and Bala end up trapped in the anthill, and Bala runs over to the queen to explain the danger that they are all in. Meanwhile, Z runs over to the workers and tells them to stop digging. The supervisor doesn't listen, grabs a pickaxe, and finishes it off himself. Water starts squirting out, and they all start running away while the water comes bursting through the anthill. All of the ants gather towards the middle of the room, managing to stay clear of the water. Z stands up and explains that the only way to get out is if they all build a big ladder of ants. They all build up a huge ladder, and Z and Azteca climb to the very top, reaching the roof, and start quickly digging through the dirt. Meanwhile, Weaver holds his breath as the water level rises above him, because he is at the bottom holding the ladder. We then see General Mandible giving a speech to all of his soldiers talking about a new beginning, before Z punches his hand through the dirt, creating a huge hole beneath them. Mandible gets angry and goes to attack Z with a spear, but Colonel Cutter steps in, and punches Mandible out of the way. Mandible gets very angry, stands up and charges towards Cutter. Z pushes Cutter out of the way to save him, and ends up being pushed back down into the anthill along with Mandible. Mandible lands on a solid surface and dies, but Z luckily lands in the water. Colonel Cutter orders the soldiers to help all of the ants up, and flies down to save Z. He manages to bring him up to the surface, but Z is unconscious. Princess Bala gives mouth to mouth, he wakes up, and all of the ants start cheering. Please make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notifications so you never miss a recap. Thanks for watching.